Tragedy, betrayal, infidelity, pain of betrayal, betrayed wife, lover, pregnancy, real drama, testimony, real story, intimate account, unfaithful husband, secret revealed, betrayed wife, suffering, outburst, trousseau, embroidery of the name, revolt, destroyed marriage. These words may seem like emotional triggers, but together they tell one of the most shocking and revolting stories you will hear today. Imagine living with a man for over a decade, taking care of the house, his routine, his wounds, loving every detail of his daily life. Now imagine, in silence, being betrayed, deceived, used, and worse, being made a fool of, to the point that you yourself embroider the name of your pregnant lover on the baby's layette. Is that too strong? Because this is just the first layer of this true story. Today, you will hear the painful testimony of a woman who dedicated herself completely to her marriage, believing she was building a solid family, when in fact, she was being used as a stage for a dirty and cruel lie. She was suspicious, of course. Deep down, every woman feels when something is not right. The touch that changes, the distant look, the lame excuses, the deleted messages on her phone, the absence disguised as tiredness. But even with the warnings screaming inside her, she chose to trust. She chose to love more, to fight more. And, ironically, it was this love that put her in the most humiliating position of her life. Our protagonist is a woman like so many others, dedicated, resilient, generous. Someone who never imagined that her greatest gesture of affection would become the symbol of her greatest pain. When she discovered that her lover was pregnant, it was too late. She had already embroidered the child's name, without knowing that the child was not her granddaughter, but the fruit of a cruel betrayal. And if you think you've heard it all, get ready, because this is just the beginning. This story is told with a broken heart, with tears still fresh, and with the courage of someone who no longer accepts living in silence. It is about betrayal, yes, but it is also about redemption, justice, and a woman's reunion with herself after being torn apart inside. Now, I ask you, what would you do if you found out that your husband's lover was pregnant, and you yourself, without knowing, helped prepare the layette for this child? Would you forgive? Would you take revenge? Would you pretend that nothing happened? Tell me in the comments. Your thoughts may help another woman who is going through something similar. And if this story touched your heart in any way, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because no woman deserves to go through this alone.
Hello, my name is Renata. I'm 37 years old. And if you saw me today, you might say I'm strong. You might even say I look peaceful. But I carry inside me a wound that still bleeds, even if no one sees it. The story I'm going to tell here is the story of my greatest humiliation, and also of my reconstruction. I met Davi when I was 24 years old. You know that man who comes with an easy smile, a sense of the future, and a speech of stability? That was him. Davi was sweet at first, the kind who called just to say he missed you, who brought chocolate after work, who called me my queen. I was an ordinary woman full of simple dreams, to build a house, have 2 children, live in peace. Davi promised all of that. And I, a fool in love, believed him. We got married quickly. After a year and a half of dating, we were already setting up an apartment, sharing bills and dreams. I was a preschool teacher, he worked in sales. Always traveling, always tired, but always coming home with that convincing manner, that calculated kiss and an automatic I love you that, at the time, was enough for me. But after about 6 years of marriage, something started to change. It wasn't sudden, it was subtle. His scent began to change. It was as if he came back wearing a perfume I didn't wear. His clothes had a sweet, different smell. And I noticed that he avoided showering as soon as he got home. He spent more time in the bathroom. He used his phone too much, always with the screen facing down. I started to suspect. Of course I did. Every woman feels it. But you see, love makes us doubt ourselves. We start to think, am I imagining things? Is he just tired? I felt paranoid, insecure, and worse, guilty for being suspicious. One night he came home late from a trip. I was lying down, pretending to be asleep. And I heard him on the phone in the hallway, whispering, laughing softly, saying me too. I froze. The next day I confronted him. He said he was his brother, that they were planning a barbecue, and I accepted it. I swallowed hard. I almost threw up my dignity, but I accepted it. After that, I started keeping an eye on him without him knowing. I would take his phone when he was sleeping. I would try to find messages, but he would delete everything. Even so, something inside me screamed, there is another woman, but I had no proof. And without proof, he turned me inside out.
He said,
I was neurotic, that I needed therapy, that I was becoming obsessed. I believed he still loved me, that it was just a phase. So what did I do? I started to invest even more in our relationship. We made plans to renew our vows. I started sewing new things for the house, embroidering dish towels, renovating the back room so that maybe one day we could have a child. And it was at this stage that everything became even more perverse. One day he arrived with a strange conversation. He said that the wife of a work friend was pregnant but without much support, that she was alone, that she was fragile, that he had been touched by the situation and wanted to help with a few things. She asked me with that "you're so skilled" tone to embroider the child's name on the layette. I, trying to be that wonderful wife, said yes, with all my love. He brought me a name, Isadora. A beautiful name. I was moved just thinking about that mother alone. I spent 3 nights embroidering with great care. 3 nights putting love in every stitch. I made a little towel, a little diaper, and a little washcloth, all with Isadora's name on them. While I was embroidering, I thought, poor mother alone in need of support. I'm glad we can help. Little did I know. The mother was the lover. The child was my husband's daughter. And I was the idiot who embroidered the name with affection, as if I was being part of something beautiful. This wasn't rock bottom yet, but it was the beginning of the descent. It was on a Saturday afternoon, 2 months later, that the truth knocked on my door, literally, but this part. On the Saturday when everything fell apart, I was washing the yard. The sun was shining, and I remember feeling a little dizzy from the heat. The water was dripping, the soap making patterns on the floor. And that's when the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. In a hurry, insistently. I dried my hands on my apron, thinking it was the delivery man with the cat food. But when I opened the gate, I came face to face with a woman I had never seen in my life. Brunette, in her early 20s, with a noticeable belly. She looked at me with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. And without expecting anything, she said, "Are you Renata?" I nodded, suspicious, and then she said, "I'm Vanessa. I'm pregnant with Davi." It was as if the floor had turned to soap water too. My feet slipped inside me. Everything spun. My throat went dry instantly. All I could say was, "Van?" She repeated more firmly, "I'm Vanessa, your husband's lover, and this child here is his daughter." I don't remember very well what happened in the next 5 minutes. I only know that the neighbor next door appeared because she heard the screaming, that I fell to my knees on the sidewalk, that Vanessa stood there still, as if she had waited a long time for that moment, and that I was crying. But it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of ... hate. Vanessa then took a small bag out of the backpack she was carrying on her shoulders. It was pink, full of details, and she handed it to me. "This is the trousseau. You embroidered it, remember? Isadora will wear it." She handed it to me like someone handing me a dirty, stained trophy. A trophy of defeat. A cruel reminder. I took the package to the living room. I opened it with trembling hands. Every embroidered cloth was there, my embroidery, my affection, my good intentions being spat in my face. That night, David came home from work and found the house eerily silent. I was sitting on the couch with the blankets on my lap. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I just showed him his reaction. Do you know what he said? She came to you. That crazy woman crossed the line. Yes, he had the audacity to call his lover crazy, to turn everything around. Two, tried to make me think that the problem was her, not him. Do you want to tell me something, David? I asked, still without raising my voice. He was silent, then he sat down.
He ran his hands over his face and he said, "It was a mistake."
I did get involved, yes. But I didn't know she was going to get pregnant. I swear, Renata, it wasn't supposed to be like this. That sentence gave me goosebumps all over. It wasn't supposed to be like this. What should it be like then? A hidden fuck, a well-kept secret, me in the dark forever. I felt my stomach turn. I went to the bathroom and threw up. And there, kneeling on the cold floor, I understood that marriage was over. But I didn't tell him that. Not yet. David tried to make things right in the days that followed. He sent me flowers. He wrote me letters. He told me he was going to take responsibility for the child, but that he loved me and wanted to be with me. I didn't know what to do. I felt like an idiot. But I also felt too weak to leave. For 2 weeks, I lived under anesthesia. I ate little. I slept badly. I worked on autopilot. And the worst part? I found myself looking at Isadora's clothes with sadness. As if, in some sick way, I had already become attached to the idea of that baby. As if it wasn't her fault. But the wound was still bleeding. A lot. And one day, while messing around with Davi's computer, I discovered something he never
Told me.
It was a rainy Friday. I had left work early because I had a migraine. I got home wanting to just lie down and forget that there was a world outside. David hadn't arrived yet, and the silence in the house was almost comforting. That's when I saw his laptop open on the table in the living room. He rarely left it there. At first, I was just going to close the lid and put it on charge. But then a notification popped up on the screen. A message from WhatsApp Web, the name, Vanessa. My heart raced. My finger hesitated, but I clicked. The conversation was open. And there it all was. Every disgusting detail, every carefully told lie. Messages from weeks, months ago. Declarations of love, promises, plans to meet in cheap hotels. Photos of her in lingerie, photos of the two of them together. Him with that smile that, until then, I thought was only mine. But what really destroyed me was the date of one of the messages. Honey, do you think Renata suspected when you said you were going to work that Sunday? I remember that Sunday. He left saying he had an extra shift at the hospital, and I prepared lunch and waited for him to come back. I bought wine. I put flowers on the table. There were also messages talking about me, calling me silly, prudish, tiring. Vanessa laughed at the affectionate notes I left on his car. She took pictures and sent them to him. They made fun of me. It tore me apart inside. The kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but tears. I stood there for hours reading everything. Crying without making a sound, a muffled, wet, silent cry. When I heard his car in the garage, I didn't react. I simply closed the laptop, went up to my room and locked the door. He tried to come in. He knocked. He called.
He said he wanted to talk, but I didn't open the door.
That night I slept with a soaked pillow. In the following days, David seemed remorseful, trying to act normal, offering me coffee, asking if I wanted to go out for dinner. I only responded the minimum. He realized that I had read the conversation. One day he asked me directly, "Did you see anything on the notebook?" I just said, "I saw everything." He turned pale. She sat on the couch and started to cry. She said she was ashamed, that she couldn't explain why she did it, that she was weak, that she was afraid of losing me, but at the same time afraid of facing her own emptiness. "You didn't lose me now, you lost me long ago, David." That phrase came out of my mouth like a sentence, and maybe it was. Even so, I was still trapped. By the routine, by the emotional dependence. by the cowardice of leaving a marriage that seemed so perfect on the outside. A week later, I get a call from Vanessa. I answer, nervous. She says, "I know you read the conversation. I didn't want you to know like this, but now that you know, I want you to know that he promised me he would break up." I don't answer. She continues, "I'm not just his lover. I'm the woman he loves. And you know it." I hang up the phone. I throw it away. I scream. A scream that comes from my womb, from my soul, from the dirtiest part of everything I've ever experienced. Then I understood it was no longer just a betrayal. It was a war. And I was alone in it. In the following days, I began to live like a ghost. I went to work, came back, pretended. I had crying fits in the shower. And I began to wonder if it was fair to continue living like this, in silence, in suffering. That's when I received an unexpected visit, Davi's mother. She appeared, as if she already knew everything. She sat down with me and said, "Renata, I never got involved. But this time I need to speak up. I consider you a daughter. But Davi has this dark side. He saw his father do this to his mother, and he thought it was normal." She told me stories I never imagined. Her father's infidelities, her mother's omissions. A repeated cycle. She held my hand and said, "You have no obligation to carry this cross." It was like hearing what I needed. A push from life. But I still didn't know how to leave. I still loved Davi, or at least the idea of him. The idea of the life we had. Built. I started planning. I made a list of my finances. I looked for a lawyer. I talked to my sister. I didn't want to leave the house screaming. I wanted to leave with dignity. And before I could take any action, a new bomb dropped on my lap. Vanessa had lost the baby. Yes, little Isadora was not born. She had complications in the 28th week and did not survive. Davi was distraught. He cried, despaired, and left home for 2 days. And me? I felt strangely empty. Part of me felt sorry. Part of me hated feeling sorry. When he came back, he was different. More human, perhaps, but also more lost. He got down on his knees and asked me for forgiveness. He said all he wanted was to rebuild his life with me, that his daughter's death had changed everything. And I stood there, not knowing if what I felt was forgiveness or pity. The next morning, I got out of bed as if in a trance. David was still asleep, curled up on his side like a lost child. It was strange to look at him and not see the same man I had married. Or maybe he had always been this way, and I was just seeing it now. I went to the kitchen and made coffee like I always did, but this time I only put 1 cup on the table. His was in the cupboard. Those little decisions, you know? That seems silly, but they hurt. I felt like every gesture I made was a way of freeing myself, a thread cut from the web that held us together. He woke up and came to me. He hugged me from behind, put his face in my neck, and took a deep breath. I didn't say anything. I walked away slowly, not angry, just exhausted. He understood. "Are you going to leave me?" he asked in a choked voice. "I don't know yet," I replied. "But we can't just go on as if nothing happened."
David
Had been crying a lot the last few days. A type of crying I hadn't seen before. A crying that seemed more for himself than for what he had done to me. It was as if his daughter's death had opened a wound in him that had been festering for years. And I was just the cloth he used to hide it. That day I decided to go out for a bit. I went for a walk. I sat on a park bench and watched people go by. Couples, children, mothers pushing strollers, elderly people holding hands. And I realized how much I had stopped existing because of him. I was always the one who would put myself aside. I would put away hunger, sleep, desires, dreams. I would put away everything to maintain the idea of a perfect family. And there, in that square, I understood that perhaps I had been an accomplice to my own pain. I returned home determined to write a letter, a farewell letter, not from the relationship, but from Renata, who I went there for. "Renata, you were too strong to the point of breaking. You deserve more than emotional crumbs. You deserve to be loved completely, without having to sew your lover's name into your trousseau. Enough." I wrote this with tears in my eyes, but with determination. I put the letter in the drawer of my bedside table. I didn't know when I would leave yet, but I knew I was on my way. In the following weeks, the house became a theater. Davi and I walked in circles, avoiding arguments, pretending a normality that no longer existed, but his gaze followed me. A gaze that asked for time, compassion, perhaps redemption. That's when he called me to talk. He said he had something important to show me. I confessed that I froze. I thought about another pain, another piece of this puzzle that I no longer wanted to put together. But I went. He took me to the garage. Inside, one of the old cabinets we used to store stuff was open, inside a box. He took out a folder of documents. Medical papers, tests, prescriptions, reports. Vanessa knew she had a serious condition. Placenta previa with a risk of detachment. She hid it from me at first, and I found out too late. When I took her to the hospital, she was already bleeding heavily, and I was desperate. I was speechless. He opened another page. A DNA test requested during prenatal care. I asked even before she lost the baby, and Renata, the exam shows it wasn't mine. My head spun. Like this? He choked. She said she was pregnant with me, but the father was another guy, an ex. She just used the pregnancy to trap me. I stepped away. I sat down. I took a deep breath. And you believed her until the end? Even with all the lies? Yes, because I wanted to believe. Because I had fucked up enough, and I thought that at least that baby would give me some sense. I felt sorry, but also angry. Angry at myself for still caring. In the days that followed, he was silent. And so was I until one Saturday I packed my bags. He came in from the street and saw me with my suitcase in the hallway. Where are you going? For me, for my life, I need to go. I need to find myself outside of this. He didn't answer. He just leaned against the wall and started crying. At that moment, I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath, looked at him and said, I won't scream, nor hate you, because I don't want to take you with me. I'll go lightly for once. I left the house with my suitcase, my dignity, and the letter in my pocket. I stayed at my sister's house for a while. She welcomed me warmly and made sure to remind me every day that I was not alone. I started therapy. I went back to school. I took a textile design course, something I always wanted to do. I met new people, new stories, and I started to reconnect with myself. David still sent me messages. Some were affectionate, others desperate, but I didn't respond. I needed this. Silence. It was my shield, until one day he sent me a letter. A real one, handwritten. Renata, I destroyed you. But I also destroyed myself. And now I understand that love is not what holds you back. It is what sets you free. If you ever want to talk, I will be here. If you don't, I will understand. But I will never stop admiring you for everything you were. And most importantly, for what you had the courage to become. I read it with tears in my eyes, but I didn't cry. Because for the first time, I felt whole. I didn't know yet if I could forgive, but I knew I didn't hate anymore. And that, for me, was already liberating. That morning, the silence in the house seemed denser than ever. The clock was just after 7 when I heard loud knocking on the gate. I got up with my heart racing, still a little numb from the night's sleeplessness. I peeked through the crack in the window and saw Aina, Vanessa's sister. She was pale with red eyes, and she was holding an envelope in her hands. I opened the gate with my whole body trembling, without understanding what was happening. She didn't say anything. She just handed me the envelope and whispered, she died. The feeling was like a sharp slap in the face. The world seemed to lose sound for a few seconds. I stood there, motionless, looking at Aina as if she were speaking another language. What do you mean? I managed to say, my voice breaking. Anna explained, her voice breaking. Vanessa had suffered severe bleeding after giving birth. Complications. She didn't survive. The baby was in the ICU, a boy. I heard it, but it was as if my body had shut down. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. Anna pressed the envelope to my chest and said, with tears in her eyes, she wrote this for you. She asked you to give it to her if anything happened. I closed the gate without saying anything. My legs could barely support my weight. I dragged myself to the couch, opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Vanessa's. Renata, if you're reading this, it's because I couldn't go back. I wanted it to be different. I wanted you to hate me with reason, but also to understand. I fell in love with Davi before you even knew he existed. He was the man of my dreams. But when I found out you were together, I lost my mind. It wasn't just envy, it was pain. It was anger at myself for not having been chosen. When we got together, yes, more than once, I knew I was making a mistake. But he came back. He always came back. He told me that things were different. With you, that you were family, church, a project, and me, I was the escape, a mistake, the adrenaline. But I thought that could change. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it would be a new beginning. But then fear set in. Fear of you. Fear of me. Fear of the world. I manipulated, yes. I showed tests that weren't even mine. I made up symptoms, all to keep Davi with me. To keep you away, but he didn't stay. And when the baby was born, it was too late. If I don't survive, I want you to know. It was my fault. Not his, not yours, mine. Take care of my son if you can. Give him the love I didn't know how to give. Sorry for everything. Vanessa. The letter fell from my hands as if it had been burning. I curled up on the couch, tears stuck in my throat. It was as if all the pain of the past had condensed in that moment. And there I was, alone, with a letter of forgiveness and an impossible request. Take care of her son. The son of David, the son of betrayal. That child, as innocent as everything that had been taken from us, was now alive. And I had to decide what to do with this new life that, in a way, also belonged to me. I spent the day locked up. I refused calls. I turned off my cell phone. The whole world seemed to have stopped. Memories came flooding back. The embroidered trousseau, Davi's gaze at Mass. The day I first suspected something, the lies, the humiliation. But now there was something new, a life, a baby. A being that didn't ask to be born in the middle of that chaos. And even without seeing his little face, without hearing his cry, I felt something, a pain that wasn't just mine. It was his too. The next morning, I went to the hospital. Anna was waiting for me at the door. We hugged without saying a word. She took me to the neonatal ICU. When I saw that little being, so fragile, so defenseless, my heart broke again. But in a different way. It wasn't the pain of betrayal. It was the pain of impossible love. There was the child of the man who had destroyed my dreams, of the woman who had stolen my hopes. And yet, he was a baby. That was all, nothing more. The doctor said he needed care, that his grandparents were in shock and didn't know what to do. They asked if I was interested in helping in the first few days as a godmother, as an acquaintance. Anna said that Vanessa had no one besides her. I returned home with the image of that baby fixed in my eyes. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Everything was suffocating me. The doubt, the fear, the anger, the strange affection that was beginning to emerge. On the third day, I went back to the hospital. I asked to hold him in my arms. They gave me a chair. They placed him in my arms. And at that moment, when I felt his heart beating close to mine, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. It wasn't just Vanessa's son. It was a life, period, and something inside me, maybe God, maybe what was left of the woman who dreamed of a family, whispered, "You can love even after everything." I started going every day. I brought him little clothes, read to him, and rocked him to sleep. The doctors were impressed. They said his recovery was fast, as if the baby knew someone was waiting for him. One of those afternoons I met David in the hallway. He stopped and looked at me with swollen eyes. "You came?" I just nodded. I didn't have the strength to argue. "He's got your look," he said, his voice shaking. I almost answered. I almost said, "It's not mine," but I couldn't because somehow I had already let that baby in. And that scared me, a different kind of fear, deep fear. On the way out, Davi followed me to the car. "I know I have no right to anything, but I want to thank you. I'm not doing this for you. I know. I'm doing it because someone needs to love him. And I refused to let him start his life being rejected like I was at the end of mine. David lowered his head. For the first time, he seemed to understand. In the days that followed, I had nightmares. I dreamed of Vanessa watching me, with eyes that sometimes pleaded, sometimes judged. I dreamed of the baby calling me Mom. I woke up scared, not knowing what was right anymore. So I did something unthinkable. I wrote to my therapist, whom I hadn't seen in months. I scheduled a session. I entered the room as if I were returning to the battlefield. I told her everything, every detail. The love, the pain, the betrayal, the baby. She listened to me in silence and then said, "You are healing." Because loving after being hurt is the clearest sign that your heart still lives. I left there feeling lighter. Still hurt, yes, but less alone. That night I held Vanessa's letter again, and I realized there was something about it that I hadn't noticed. A small stain in the corner, like a teardrop. Had she been crying while writing it? Perhaps, or maybe it was just another trick, but now it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I would do with it. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to the baby, even though he didn't know. My name yet. If I decide to stay, it won't be for the past. It will be for the future. In the days that followed the Mass, everything seemed calmer. I was beginning to find a certain peace, like someone learning to walk again after a bad fall. But life, as always, still had surprises in store.
And
Not all of them were sweet. I was working on a new project for the course, a textile panel about emotional memories. The idea was to use scraps that would tell pieces of our history. I chose pieces of fabric from my old trousseau. Yes, that one. The one I had embroidered with so much love, which later turned out to be an involuntary monument to lies. But now, sewn in a different way, it seemed to take on new meaning. It was as if I were embroidering my own story all over again. One of those afternoons, Luana, my friend from the course, invited me to have coffee with some of her classmates. We went, laughed a lot, and talked about everything. The feeling of lightness was almost strange. I even allowed myself for a moment to think that life was finally getting back on track. But on the way home, still with a smile on my face, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Aina, Vanessa's sister. "Renata, forgive me, but I need to show you something. Will you meet me tomorrow?" I answered yes, although with a heavy heart. I no longer knew what to expect when the past called me back. The next day, we met in a quiet park. She looked nervous, holding a cardboard folder. I hesitated a lot before coming, but I thought you deserved to know. He opened the folder and handed me some papers. They were printed messages, conversations, between Vanessa and a woman named Bianca. I read it, and each word seemed to take the breath away from me. Bianca was my cousin, the one who lived in another city and who I barely spoke to. The one who, according to my mother, was having problems in her marriage. The one who appeared in some old photos of our wedding, but who I always considered distant. There, in the messages, it was clear. Vanessa and Bianca not only knew each other, but also exchanged confidences about me, about Davi, about what she called a psychological game. "She's going to break," read one of Vanessa's messages. "She deserves it," Bianca replied. It was like a nightmare written in black and white. My cousin had helped Vanessa create the illusion of pregnancy. She even suggested that she show her ultrasounds of another woman. They discussed ways to keep Davi under the illusion. They talked about me with disdain, as if I were a ridiculous, naive, worthless doll. I finished reading in silence. Aina just waited, her eyes full of guilt and compassion. "Why?" was all I could say. She replied in a whisper. Bianca hated the way you were admired in the family. She said your mother always defended you, that you were the perfect one. And when she found out that Davi had been with Vanessa ... It seems she saw it as a way to put you in your place. She fed my sisters. Madness. I froze. My blood coursed through my veins with a strange, heavy heat. David's betrayal had already destroyed me once, but this was poison. This was cold wickedness. I returned home in shock. I sat on the floor of my room and cried like I hadn't. Cried in a long time. A silent, deep cry that comes from deep within when we realize that the pain has more layers than we imagined. I picked up my phone and opened Bianca's contact information. It was there as usual, inactive for months. We were never close, but she always sent me messages on special dates. Never again since all that. I thought about calling, about writing, but no, the truth was already there. And I knew that any response from her would be an excuse, manipulation. Cynicism. I decided to write a letter, not to her, but to myself. Renata, you survived a betrayal, then the loss of a dream. Now, discovering that blood also lies, manipulates, and destroys. But you are still here. And while you are here, you can start over. I burned the letter afterwards. It was my liberation ritual. In the following days, I declined all of Luana's invitations to go out. I said I was busy, but she knew. One day, she showed up at my house with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. If you don't speak, I'll just stand here in silence with you. But I will! I cried on her shoulder. I told her everything. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. Because I learned that shame belongs to those who hurt, not to those who trust. Luana looked at me with teary eyes. Do you have any idea how strong you are? Some people would go crazy. You turn scraps into art. That night I did something I had wanted to do for a long time. I took all the pieces of the trousseau that were still left. The ones with names embroidered on them. The ones that reminded me of pain. I tore them apart one by one, without anger, with liberation. The next day I took the pieces to the course. I transformed everything into an abstract panel. Mixed colors, crooked lines, almost erased words. I gave the work a name, Beginning of Me. And for the first time, I received sincere applause with no story. Behind it, just me, my pain transformed into expression. Then, one day, while I was washing the dishes, I received another message. This time from my sister. Are you okay? I saw some things that worried me. I didn't understand. I called. I saw Bianca at the hospital. She had a nervous breakdown. Her mother told me that she's been having a breakdown since Vanessa died. That she talks about you all the time. Says she hates you, that she needs to fix things. I felt a chill down my spine, not from fear, but from a strange premonition, as if, even from a distance, it wasn't over yet. That night, I locked doors and windows. Not for physical safety, but for a symbolic need. I needed to close everything that I had once left wide open. Before going to sleep, I reread my diary. I read the sentence on the last page. Today I closed a wound. It still hurts sometimes, but it doesn't bleed anymore. I then thought, is that really true? Or are there still open wounds that we pretend not to see? Maybe yes, maybe no. But now I know. I can deal, I can bleed and move on. I can see the worst in people and still choose not to be like them. And that, in itself, is already a start. Time has a curious way of acting on pain. It doesn't erase, correct, or undo, but it transforms. It dulls the blade that once cut deep. That's what I began to understand as the days turned into weeks. And the baby, that little being who arrived like a silent hurricane, began to gain space in my arms and in my heart.
His name was Miguel. Yes, Miguel.
That's what Vanessa wrote on the hospital form, days before the birth. And ironically, it was the same name that Davy and I had chosen years ago, when we talked between sheets and breakfast about the son we dreamed of having one day. The same name I embroidered on the first navy blue bodysuit, before discovering that trousseau wasn't for me. I swear, for a moment, I thought about changing, giving him another name, a new beginning, but I couldn't. Miguel was the name he already carried, and denying that would be like denying his right to exist. He wasn't to blame for the adult's story. Our bond began with hesitation, of course. I held him too carefully, as if touching a sacred but fragile object. But he looked at me with eyes that I could never tell if he inherited from his mother or his father, and it broke me inside. On a rainy afternoon, when he had already been at home with me for over a month, in a temporary agreement with Vanessa's family while they defined custody and guardianship. I was surprised by Davi. He arrived with a box in his hands. "They're Vanessa's things," he said. I hesitated, but I opened it. Photos, papers, notes, and a small diary. I should have refused. But curiosity is a sharp knife. I sat on the couch with Miguel sleeping in the bassinet next to me and began to read. The pages were full of regrets, disjointed sentences, childish desires, and cruel outbursts. She talked about me. She said she hated me for being so perfect, so loved, so nice. She said she wanted to be me, that she tried to find flaws but couldn't, that deep down she just wanted to be loved as I was, that she envied my faith, my strength, and even my suffering. I read that and cried, not out of anger, but out of pity. Because for the first time I saw Vanessa as she really was, a lost woman, broken inside, desperately trying to fit into a place that was never hers. And making mistakes, making a lot of mistakes. She hurt me, she destroyed me. But now she was dead, and all that was left of her was Miguel. The following weeks were confusing. The baby's maternal grandparents wanted him to live with them, but they were insecure, elderly, and tired. Davi came to me with a request. He wanted me to help him with joint custody. He said he didn't feel ready to raise the boy alone and that, despite everything, he trusted me like no one else. His audacity made me sick. But for Miguel's sake, I took a deep breath and agreed to talk to a social worker. It took months of interviews, visits, reports. It was a tiring and sometimes humiliating process. But in the end, the judge decided that the baby would stay between me and the father, in a shared custody system until a definitive adoption could be discussed. I accepted, by Miguel. And then came the hardest day of my life. We were in the courthouse signing papers when the judge asked me directly, "Are you sure you want to raise the child of the woman who destroyed your marriage?" The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me. I could have said anything. Yes, out of charity. No, out of fear. But I took a deep breath and said, yes, because what she destroyed was already broken. But he can grow back whole. The judge smiled. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. Miguel was my son, not of blood, not of womb, but of soul, of choice. And it was that choice that set me free. From that moment on, I reorganized my life. I changed houses, neighborhoods, jobs. I started living with less, but with more peace. Davi disappeared for months, but then he reappeared trying to establish a minimal presence in his son's life. And I let him for Miguel. I made sure to create a neutral environment, without lies, but also without poison. When Miguel grew up, he would know the truth. But it would be told carefully, with dignity, because he didn't deserve to carry guilt. That wasn't his. On his birthday night, when he turned 3, he called me Mom for the first time. I was in the kitchen, cutting the cake, when I heard his little voice saying, "Mommy, I want the piece with the candle." I froze. I looked at him, holding the plate with the purest look anyone had ever given me, and I smiled, tears falling. Of course, my love. That night, after everyone had left, I grabbed a box with Vanessa's letters, Davi's photos, and old exam papers, and put them all in the back of my closet. It was time to live in the present. Today, Miguel is 6 years old. He is a curious, sweet child, full of questions. He already knows that his mother went to heaven, and that I was the one who took care of him since he was born. Little by little, with the help of psychologists and a lot of love, he is understanding his story. The other day, coming back from school, he asked, "If my mother in heaven gave me you, then are you my mother in heart?" I said yes, and he smiled, satisfied. Then my heart is yours too, my eyes filled with tears. Because in that moment, all the pain of the past was transformed into gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to rebuild, to love again, to live another story. I never embroidered names on layettes again. But Miguel learned to write his own name very early on. And one day, he surprised me with a drawing that said, "Miguel and Mom, forever." He doesn't even know the weight of those words. Or maybe you do, because true love doesn't need genetics, alliances, or forgiveness. It just needs choice, and I chose. Even hurt, even judged, even tired. I chose to love, and that made all the difference. Some scars don't go away, they just change color over time. We become stronger but not immune. And I, even after everything, still have days when I wake up with a heavy heart, with the memory of that trousseau in my hands, of the muffled crying in the bathroom, of the sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where I lost myself. But today, I also have peace. Miguel already understands a lot. You are at that stage where questions come like gusts of wind, unexpected and too sincere. Why didn't my surrogate mother stay with me? He asked one late afternoon while we were washing fruit together. I swallowed hard. I knelt down, looked him straight in the eye and said, "Because her life was very difficult, my love. But before she left, she made a very beautiful choice. She let me take care of you." He thought for a few seconds. Then he said, "So you're my real gift?" I smiled with my heart all mixed up. "I think we are both gifts to each other." Miguel nodded, as if he had understood everything that mattered. And he went back to eating strawberries, as if the world were light. In the days following the court ruling, news spread throughout the neighborhood. People who had previously avoided me began to greet me with respectful looks. Others, of course, continued their whispered judgments, the cuckold who adopted her lover's son. But over time, their voices began to fade. I learned not to answer everything. I learned that not all silence is weakness. Sometimes it's just maturity. David, in turn, has become almost a shadow.
He tries to be present, but guilt seems to have taken up residence inside him. I was angry. Today I feel sorry.
He apologizes to me like someone throwing coins into a well, hoping that some miracle will redeem him. But I'm not a well. Nor a miracle worker. I'm just a woman who decided to continue when everything around her seemed to have stopped. The other day, Miguel found one of his old clothes at the bottom of his drawer. It was a little jumpsuit embroidered with his name, the same one I had made before I knew everything.
He brought it to me and asked, "You did this, right?"
I nodded with a nostalgic smile. And he replied, "I knew. Because only your scent is the same on that cloth." I was silent for a moment. Those words went through me like a sweet lightning bolt. Because, without knowing it, he was giving me back everything I had lost at that time, meaning love, identity. Today, when people ask me if I regret anything, I hesitate before answering. I don't regret having loved Davi. I don't regret having embroidered that trousseau with love. And, most of all, I don't regret having opened my heart to Miguel. But I do regret having remained silent for so long. Having ignored my intuition. Having erased myself to fit into the expectations of a marriage that was already broken even before the betrayal. But even that became a force. I wrote a diary. Page by page, I relived the worst and best days. And on a whim, I posted excerpts from it on social media. The response was overwhelming. Women started reaching out to me,
Telling similar stories.
crying out for support, asking for advice. Some just needed someone to tell them, "You're not crazy." And so a group was born. A safe space, where wounds became strength, where words stopped being choked screams and became a bridge. I discovered that, like me, many women had embroidered the names of their own pains, some on diapers, some on cracked walls, some on letters never sent. I'm not saying that I forgave David completely, nor that Vanessa became a saint in my heart. But I understood that hatred would only keep me chained to a past that I could not change, and I wanted freedom. I wanted to be an example for my son. I wanted to be more than a victim. I wanted to be a new beginning. Today, Miguel calls me Mom, with the same naturalness that other children call the person who gave birth to them. But between us, there is something even rarer, choice. I chose to love, and he chose to trust. At school, he drew a picture of our family, me, him, and a yellow light above our heads. I asked what that was. "It's my mother in heaven watching over us," he said. "And do you think she's happy?" "She smiled in my dream yesterday," he replied. I remained silent. Maybe Vanessa really did smile. Maybe she didn't. But at that moment, everything felt right. And I understood that despite the chaos, despite the pain, despite all the betrayals, my story was not about what was taken from, me, but about what I chose to build with what was left. Miguel today calls me Brave Mom, and I carry that title with more pride than any diploma or social status. Because it took a lot of courage to continue, to not return the pain, to embrace the improbable, to remake what seemed irremediable. And now looking back, I see that it was all worth it. That trousseau embroidered with innocence and love, even for another woman, became the thread that connected me to the greatest gift of my life. And you know what? If I could go back in time, I would embroider it all over again. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the pieces of a betrayal? Have you ever loved someone even after the pain? Have you ever been judged for a choice that your heart made in silence? Comment here. Your story may help someone else. If you felt something while reading this rant, like share and subscribe to the channel. Real stories like this can change destinies, because sometimes all we need is to be heard.